Time for our weekly visit with Adam Terry, who will be heading down to Clemson to call the game, as always, for the Syracuse Sports Network through Learfield. Adam, a former great offensive lineman for the Orange and in the NFL. And this is when the fun starts, Adam. We get into ACC play, and it starts with a trip to Death Valley. We know the history here for Syracuse. We know this is a hostile environment. I guess 3 weeks into the season, there's not a ton to take away from what we've seen, but what excites you the most about how this young team has looked and how they've grown through 3 weeks of the season?
Well, for Syracuse, I think it's their first opportunity going into a hostile environment. You know, we went down to Atlanta, we played Tennessee in more of a neutral environment in which we saw more Volunteers fans in the stands in Syracuse, but this is a brand new one. You know, this is Dabo leading the guys off the bus, running down the hill, getting Death Valley going and rocking, and the opportunity for Syracuse to play against the team that they themselves in Clemson is trying to prove themselves. So I like the opportunity here, and it's walk off the bus, get ready. It's a nooner. You kick it off real fast, and, you know, you just let it roll.
Yeah, we've seen Syracuse hang in these games, different coaching staff. This will be Fran Brown's first trip to Death Valley, first time against his pal Dabo Swinney, but they have been big underdogs going down to Death Valley before, and there's been some blowouts, and there's also been some games, of course, where Syracuse has played up to competition and has really been in the game down there 2 separate times where you felt like they were going to win the game. Do you feel like this team is ready to maybe shock the world or be in that conversation of kind of a game in the fourth quarter here against Clemson? And I guess knowing that Clemson has not been their normal selves here through 3 weeks. We've seen Clemson for 12 quarters, and it hasn't looked great to this point.
Right. I think offensively it hasn't looked great, but defensively they've got some guys up front that can move and really get after the quarterback. So
yeah.
First and foremost, I think if you look at the offensive side of the football, you're going to have to be able to protect, and you're going to actually have to be able to run the football. So, you know, that week last week with Usain Willis out, you know, hopefully he's healed and is ready to go, because this is one where you're going to want to run the football. You're going to want to establish a run game, but also what we've seen is Angeli being able to throw it around and have the gotten the grasp of the offense of Jeff Nixon's offense. And then defensively, you know, I think this is where Syracuse is probably the closest it's been in years. Offensively for Clemson, they really haven't been able to put it together. And they look a little bit disjointed. With that being said, let's hope that this isn't the game that they get it together and the defense can really get after their offense. And the way that you've seen it, whether that was Troy or whether that was LSU, is, you know, get in their face, blitz them, get after him, make him throw the ball, make Cade Klubnik throw the ball quicker than what he wants to. Left tackle position is one that's kind of uncertain. They bumped that left guard out and had him playing left tackle, and he looks as though he opens his hips pretty soon. And let's see if David Reese can get after him in the pass rush game.
Yeah, I think that was the game plan for LSU. Watching a lot of that game week one, they really got after Cade Klubnik, blitzed him a lot like you're talking about. Is the offensive line for Clemson as underwhelming as people are saying from what you've gathered? I know you brought up the left tackle, but going into the season, we thought Clemson had the makings of a national championship team. They were talked about as the best offensive line, best defensive line in the ACC, and one of the best in the country. What do you make of what is the most surprising thing that you've watched Clemson and seen how much they've struggled through 3 weeks?
Well, I think just up front for Clemson, it's the revolving door of players, right? You know, their starting left tackle goes out against LSU, so they take their left guard. Sadler, they bump him out. Sewell then comes in and plays the next 2 games, moving from right guard to left guard. And then, you know, their center's been pretty consistent, and then that right guard has been a little bit of a turnstile revolving door as well. But the one way that I would not try to pressure them is, you know, their right tackle, Blake Miller. He looks solid. He's a good player. Keeps the shoulders square. So what I've seen is not necessarily beating people one-on-one, but beating them with speed and effort and adding 1 to 2 blitzers going after him. But, for Syracuse, they got to hit home, right? If they're going to do that, they're using capital that could be covering in the back end to put pressure on Kate Klubnik. But they've just got to start to hit home and get Klubnik on the ground.
How much for Syracuse, and a lot has been made about they're not getting to the quarterback, and Fran Brown has said it, that we need to tackle their quarterback more and we need to keep our quarterback more upright is kind of the big keys for the Orange right now. I watched back that game, and even being at the game against Colgate, they had some opportunities with a free rusher. You get a defensive back in the backfield, and they're not capitalizing sometimes, it feels like, once they do call up a blitz that works. How much are you seeing the defense right now and the inability to get sacks as a scheme issue or just personnel and not capitalizing when you do have the opportunity in the backfield?
Well, it's a little bit of both, right? Guys that are rushing the passer, they've got to continue to hone their craft. I love Nick Williams, their defensive end, their defensive line guy, and he will get them dialed in by the end of the season. But it's also, how do we get after him? So there's that base 4-down look where we're going to get after him, and then the secondary as well is, coming downhill, getting to the line of scrimmage in a hurry. But then at the end, you've got to wrap them up, or you've got to take them down regardless. So I like the ability of what we have, and now this is the matchup on offense for Clemson. Can they put a game together? And then for Syracuse, they put a couple drives and they've looked good in halves and quarters, but can they put a solid defensive performance together and create some turnovers? Because that's going to be the one I think is the biggest difference in this game is going to be turnovers.
Adam Terry is with us. He'll be on the call for the Learfield broadcast on the radio side of things. You can always listen to it on TK99. Saturday noon kick down in Death Valley, Syracuse and Clemson. Adam, I think a lot of callers this week and a lot of fans are jumping on the Jeff Nixon bandwagon, which I know you've been gushing about Jeff Nixon's offense ever since he came to Syracuse and the different types of looks he has. And once again, we see Steve Angeli, as of right now, leading the country in passing yards, just as Kyle McCord did last year. I heard Dabo say this week in his press conference that it's a ton of RPO looks, and I think we've known that. But as someone that loves Jeff Nixon, loves studying offensive football, what is it about his offense that is the most impressive part? And what about Syracuse's scheme really wows you when you watch him call plays?
I think a lot of it starts in the beginning of the week in preparation because it's personnel groupings. How are you going to run personnel up to the field and create a mismatch against their team? We talk about personnel all the time and having tight ends and doing this and doing that. But when Jeff Nixon runs a personnel grouping on, there's flexibility of, taking a Dan Villari and a Clement and putting them down with their hands and then bringing them across and leaving Clement on the line of scrimmage. And then Villari goes into a slot receiver, right? Like we saw it a lot last year with the ability of Aronde Gadsden to play with his hand down and then stand up and play in the slot. But now he's got a bigger arsenal of wide receivers on the outside, too. So once that speed and the connection for Angeli really get to dial in, I think the limitation is going to be for Jeff Nixon, how do we keep Angeli on his feet? And then also, how do you keep Justice Ross Simmons healthy and in the game? Because we've seen already he's not the tallest, the biggest, the fastest, but when you put him on the field, he's the best wide receiver. On a lot of those matchups between both teams, and I gush over the way that Justice Ross Simmons can play, and now it's really getting him worked in as that full-time guy and having a little bit of that Jackson Meeks mentality where you're going to go in and you're going to block, you're going to catch, you're going to do all the things that you need to do to be a top-tier wide receiver.
What do you see this game coming down to? And I don't know if you've seen, but the Vegas spread right now, 17.5-point favorites for Clemson. It kind of makes sense because they're going to be really hungry coming off a loss. But as we've talked about, Clemson looks disjointed on offense. So Do you give Syracuse much of a chance, and what do you think it comes down to on Saturday?
I think the first thing is composure. You've got a team that might be older, but not a lot of experience. You look at some of these guys that are seniors; they might be a transfer in from some other universities. So I think the first thing is composure. Act right during the warm up. Right there is some type of intimidation factor when you go down and you see that paw on the side of the helmet, and you see the Paul logo in the middle of the field. Like those are legit things. So walking off the bus, doing the warm-ups, being prepared, and not letting the pomp and circumstance get you taken away from what you need to do. And then after you've gotten that dialed in, keep it reasonable, right? Like I watched the Tennessee game, and throughout the whole process in the Tennessee game, there's opportunities where we can really get back into the game, and then boom, a full tidal wave comes back on the opposite side, and we were just, trying to keep our head above water. Where this is keeping the game and managing the game so that it doesn't get away from us, and we have the opportunity late in the game to get that win. Just like a few years ago when we had that offsides penalty, and we really had them against the ropes. And now it's an opportunity to kind of go in with a similar game plan. And then if you get the lead, put the hammer down, right? Like, if you have the lead at some point in time, there's no problem taking shots, especially if your defense is playing well. You got to go after them, and you've got to get up early because we know they can climb back. We watched the Troy game where Troy was up and they clawed back into it. LSU was kind of a little bit of this back and forth early, and then they let it get away from him. And then the Georgia Tech game is, they're back and forth, and Georgia Tech just had enough to squeeze that one out. And, I think for Syracuse, that's kind of the same thing that you're going to have to do, because when you look at Clemson in that Georgia Tech game, Clemson clawed back 13 points. So in the fourth quarter, so they were really getting after it, and they were just too far behind in order to really get back into it. And I think that same game plan resonates for Syracuse. Is if you get up, go after it. Go after the touchdowns. Don't leave points on the field. If you're going to kick a field goal, right? But in the red zone, start putting up some points.
Yeah, should be interesting to see how this young Orange team looks on the road. First true road test of the season, first outdoor game of the season as well. And he is Adam Terry. He joins us every week on the show. Enjoy the trip down there, Adam, and we'll catch up with you soon.
I appreciate it, man. Have a good one.